Okay, here we go. In the last section, we identified theater as a performing art by virtue of its main art object, dramatic action. Now let's take a close look at the specific nature of dramatic action and how your understanding of the main art object of theater will help you to better appreciate this unique art form. When we're watching a play, we experience the dramatic action as it unfolds in front of us. It looks so much like real life that we often don't realize that what we're experiencing is a very carefully crafted work of art. To see how dramatic action is crafted, we need to understand it in all its manifestations. First, let's consider dramatic action in its simplest form, the individual action. In the play Master Harold and the Boys, the lights come up on two individuals who are each engaged in individual action. The younger character, Willie, a black South African, is on his hands and knees and is washing the floor. The other character, Sam, also a black South African, is standing by a table reading a comic book. These are individual actions. Naturally, it would be quite a boring play if these individual actions made up the evening's entertainment. So the actions continue. Willie gets up and moves his washing bucket and begins to step back and forth. This develops into a simple ballroom dance. Willie then dances around the room and asks Sam how he's doing. Sam asks him to continue and gives him suggestions for improvement. The play begins with two men involved in their own individual actions, but then evolves into a series of individual actions that make up what is referred to as sustained action. The sustained action here can be identified as Sam teaches ballroom dancing to Willie. Simplified, this is what a play is: a series of individual actions that make up a series of sustained actions. There are individual actions within a play that make up the cornerstones of a play's structure. We'll look more closely at these when we talk about the art of playwriting. So, dramatic action can be identified as individual actions or sustained actions. The overall sustained action is referred to as the spine of action. This is a great term for the overall action of a play. If you think about it, each individual action is similar to each individual vertebrae in a spine. The placement of each vertebrae determines the overall shape of the spine in the same way that the placement of each individual dramatic action will determine the overall sustained action of the play. Another way to consider dramatic action is by two basic levels of dramatic action. First, there is the observable action. This is the action that we can see taking place. Then, there is the motivation of the action. Why is the character engaged in this particular action? For what reason did they choose to engage in this particular action? The audience cannot see the motivation behind the action, but the motivating action is the gas that drives the engine of the observable action. For instance, two characters can engage in the act of shaking hands. One individual observable action. But the motivation can be different for both characters. One character could be shaking the other character's hand as an act of forgiveness. The other could be shaking his hand to deceive the other character. Directors and actors are always considering the motivation behind the character's action, because it affects how the performer will act out each individual action and what shape the spine of action will take. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion of theater arts. Next, we'll talk about the beginnings of theater and ask what human instincts made theater an inevitable art form. We'll take a look at the practices of theater during the ancient Greek period and see how they've affected the art of theater today.